Today we're going to be going over our practice book pages together. So before you start this video, you will need to pull up your practice book and open it to page 373. So pause this video and open up your practice book to page 373. Now that you have this page open, today we're going to be focusing on word problems using decimals. So let's begin at the top here. Follow along with me as I read. The weather in different parts of the United States has a noticeable effect on the plants and trees. In warm parts of the country, trees can keep their leaves all year long. In the northern states, fall weather causes leaves to change colors. We know about that, don't we? People from around the country plan trips to see and photograph the red, yellow, orange, and brown leaves. A fall leaf viewing trip could involve driving through a national forest, biking along a rail trail, or hiking in the mountains. Now that we have that background knowledge, let's look at number 1. It says, one popular park for photographing leaves in autumn is Macedonia Brook State Park in Kent, Connecticut. The trail is the shortest hiking trail. The yellow trail is the shortest hiking trail and is 51/100ths of a mile long. What is this fraction written as a decimal? So I'm going to circle the number 51/100ths, and I'm going to underline the question. What is the fraction written as a decimal? My fraction is 51/100ths, and if we remember, when I have my decimal place, after on the right side of the decimal place, I go tenths, hundredths. So if I were to put in 51/100ths, that's what my number would look like as a decimal. Remember, when we don't have anything in the 1 spot, if we have no whole numbers, then I would put a 0 there to mark it as nothing, or it hasn't reached 1 mile yet. You should be thinking when you look at this number, 51/100ths, wow, that's about half a mile. Why? Because 50 is half of 100, and 51/100ths would be very similar to about half a mile. So, written as a decimal, I would say 0 and 51/100ths of a mile long. Let's look at our next one here. The Rogers family is visiting Massachusetts to see the leaves change color. The old Eastern Marsh Trail is 1 2/5 mile long. The Bradford Rail Trail is 1 3/10 mile long. The Rogers family wants to take the longer trail. Which trail should they use, or should they take? So I'm going to go back and I'm going to circle my numbers. I know that the old Eastern Marsh Trail is 1 2/5 mile long, whereas the Bradford Rail Trail is 1 3/10 mile long. Remember, when we are comparing fractions, we have to make sure that the denominator is the same. So I have 1 2/5, and I have 1 3/10. I'm looking at these two, and I know that I can make this 5 into 10. In order to make that an equivalent fraction, I need to multiply the same number on the top and the bottom. 5 times what is 10? You should be thinking 2. If I multiply by 2 at the bottom, I also need to multiply by 2 at the top. What I've done now is I've created 2 fractions with the same denominator, 1 4/10, which represents the Eastern Marsh Trail. I'll represent that with an E. And 1 3/10, which represents the Bradford Rail Trail. Now I can easily compare which one is longer. The Rogers family wants to take the longer trail. So I know when my denominator is the same, I want more slices So I know that 4/10 is greater than 3/10, which means I would want to take the Old Eastern Marsh Trail. So the Old Eastern Marsh Trail. It would be really hard to compare two fractions with different decimals or with different denominators if I didn't make those common denominators. So remember, if I ask you to compare two decimals or two fractions, you are going to want to make sure that your denominator is the same. I'm going to add a little extra information. The Old Eastern Marsh Trail is 1 4/10 miles, which is 1/10 mile longer. I've added in an extra information to prove that I really know how much longer the Old Eastern March Trail is. Now that we've finished this page, turn your page and we'll look at the next page together. Remember, everything that I'm writing, you should also have written on your practice book page. So make sure if you haven't filled in what I've filled in, go back, review, rewind the video, and make sure that you've written everything that I have written up to this point. Remember, we talked about how this one was in fifths and this one was in tenths. And so we made the denominator the same so that we could compare them. Let's move on to this next page here. Before I even start, I'm going to look, it looks like I have a nice map here. Let's look over it. It looks like they've got trails on this map. It looks like a map of a forest. And it looks like they've said how long each one of the trails is too. So North Trail right here is 2 3/5 mile. Upper Trail is 1 3/5. Ooh, look at, they're kind of throwing in a decimal here. The West Trail is 2.9 miles. Okay, I've got a different denominator here. 1 1/6. The East Trail is 1 1/3. The South Trail is 1 4/8. So they're talking about trails, and each one of the trails has their distance in it. So that's very interesting the way that they did that. All right, let's look at this first part here. Follow along with me as I read. I'm going to highlight as I read. You can feel free to follow along with your finger, with your eyes, or if you want to underline, that's fine with me too. Joshua and Lily are going north to participate in a walking tour of Clarkston Park to photograph the leaves. Here is the trail map of the different walking trails. We've already noticed that. Now we know that they're specifically walking trails. Number 3 says, write the length of West Trail as a mixed number. So let's find West Trail. Here it is right here. Right now it says that West Trail is 2 9/10 mile. Now they want me to write that as a mixed number. When I see mixed number, I should be thinking fraction. Pause this video and write the West Trail's length in a fraction instead of a decimal. When you're done, see if you got it right. You should have written 2 as the whole number. The 9 is in the tenths place, so I'm writing 9/10. And hopefully you labeled it miles. Give yourself a star if you got that correct. If not, do you know what you did wrong? Let's look at number 4. Which trail is shorter, the West Trail or North Trail? Write the comparison using greater than, less than, or equal to. So let's see, we've got the West Trail, which is 2.9 miles, 2 9/10 mile. We've got the North Trail, which looks like it's right up here. Ooh, I've got 2 3/5 of a mile. So the North Trail's in a fraction. We've already made the West Trail into a fraction, so let's just change that into a fraction so it's pretty easy to compare. So we've got 2 9/10. When we're comparing our fractions, we want to make sure our denominator is the same. We talked about this just a little bit in our page before. If you pause this video and see if you can create north and west trail as with a denominator that is the same. When you're done, press play. Now that you've found a common denominator, you should have multiplied the 5 by 2. If I do it to the denominator, I've got to do it to the numerator, which means my new fraction would be 2 6/10. Now I can compare the west and the north trail. If I'm looking at the west and the north, I know that 2 9/10 is greater than 2 6/10. 2 9/10 is the west trail, so I would put west is greater than north. I'm going to write that on my line. West is greater than the north trail. You could also put, let me know, like, 2 9/10 is greater than 2 6/10. Number 5 says, write the length of the lower trail as a mixed number. Here's my lower trail here. The distance, I'm not going to read it out loud because that might help you a little bit. Tell me, pause this video and write that as a mixed number. Remember, when I see mixed number, I should think fraction, just like I have up here as my mixed number. Pause this video and do that now. Now that you've tried it by yourself, check and see if you got it right. If I were to write 1 4/10 as a mixed number, I would put 1 4/10. Did any of you go above and beyond and reduce this down or make it smaller? When I see 4/10, I think, ooh, both of those are even numbers. I can divide both of those by 2. 1 and 2, 4 divided by 2 is 2. 10 divided by 2 is 5. Awesome. If you reduced it down, give yourself an extra couple stars. If you got the correct answer by yourself before I went over it with you, give yourself a star there. Nice work. Number 6 says, which trail is longer, the lower trail or the south trail? This one's similar to number 4. I want you to work on this by yourself and see if you can write greater than, less than, or equal to with the lower or the south trail. Pause this video and do that now by yourself. Now that you've given number 6 a try, let's see how you did. Looking at the lower trail, it looks like that's 1.4 miles, and the south trail is 1 4/8. Because the south trail is as a mixed number, let's keep the lower trail as our mixed number that we made in number 5. Hopefully you did that as well. So I've got the lower trail, which is 1 4/10, and I've got the south trail as 1 4/8. Oh man, I notice my denominators are different, but the saving grace here is that my numerators are the same. Remember, when we are comparing fractions, when the denominators are different and the numerators the same, we always want to choose the smaller denominator, because I would rather share with 8 people than with 10 people. So if I were going to compare the lower and the south trail, I would say that the south trail is greater. So the lower trail is less than the south trail. You could have also written it like the south trail is greater than the lower trail. Give yourself a star if you got that right. Nice work. The last one says, write a fraction that is equivalent to the length of the north trail. On top, I have the North Trail at 2 and 2/5. Remember, when I use that word equivalent, it really means equal. And I can find equivalent fractions by doing the same thing to the numerator and the denominator. Find at least 2 equivalent fractions to 2 and 2/5. When you're done, press play and see if some of the fractions I chose are the same as the ones you chose. Now that you've tried to find some equivalent fractions, let's see if we did the same ones. I'm going to just start by multiplying by 2. Remember, I need to keep my whole number the same, so make sure, double check, did you keep your whole number the same? So 2, and then 2 times 2 is 4, 5 times 2 is 10. That's an equivalent fraction. Maybe for my next one, I'll multiply by 3. So I'm going to erase that. Okay, times 3. If I do it to the top, I do it to the bottom. My whole number stays the same. 2 times 3 is 6. 5 times 3 is 15. Those are 2 of my equivalent fractions, but guess what? As long as you multiplied the numerator and the denominator by the same number, and you remember to keep that whole number, you're good to go. Let's look down at our last question here in our practice book pages. It says this. It says, use the number line below and the benchmark numbers to name the trail whose lengths in miles is represented by each point. So they've represented the trails up here with a point, and they've given you some numbers. Looking at the number line, let's just analyze what we got going on here. So it looks like we have 1, 1.5, 2, 2.5, and 3. So it looks like they're counting by halves, which is nice, okay? It looks like A is the first one, and it's the shortest of the trails. If we look more closely here, I wonder if we could figure out which one is the shortest of all of the trails. Let's see. It looks like they all have whole numbers, but it looks like the West Trail is 2 miles, so I'm going to take that out. This one's 2 miles. That's going to be longer. So I've got 1 3/5, 1 1/6, 1 1/3, and 1 4/8. Well, I know that 1 4/8 is the same as 1 1/2. So that's my South Trail miles. Don't think that's the shortest one, but I bet I could figure out which one is 1 1/2. Hey, it looks like D is right on 1 1/2. That would be the South Trail. Let's add that in. We can eliminate the South Trail. All right, that one's all set to go. South Trail is done. Well, I wonder what's less than 1/2. It looks like we have 3 that are less than 1/2. The upper trail is 1 3/5. Half of 5 is 2.5. So that's going to be a little bit bigger than 1 1/2. Which point on our number line is a bit bigger than 1 1/2? Well, that's E. So let's put the upper trail here at E. All right. 4th graders, I've given you a few hints and I've eliminated 2 of your trails. I want you to pause this video and see if you can figure out which trails are represented by A, B, C, we've done D and E, F, and G. When you're done figuring that out, you can play the video and check your work. Do that now. All right, you should have all of your blanks filled in, A, B, C, F, and G. If you don't, pause this video and actually do it. Give it a try by yourself. All right, so it looks like the shortest of all of the trails I'm comparing is the lower trail would be 1 4/10, 1 1/6, and 1 1/3. So the shortest of all of the trails would be 1 and 1/6. 1 and 1/6 is the shortest of the trails because I would rather share with, sharing with 6 people would give me a really small piece, and sharing with 3 people would give me a bigger piece. So the mid trail is the shortest. Now that I've got that out of the way, I need to compare 1 and 4/10 with 1 and 1/3. Well, 3 doesn't go into 10. However, I know 3 goes into 30 and 10 goes into 30. So if I were to make a common denominator 30, what would I need to do to each of my numbers? Well, to 3, I'd have to multiply by 10. If I do it on the bottom, I do it on the top. And by 10, I'd have to multiply by 3. Do it on the bottom, do it on the top. It looks like the lower trail is a little bit longer than the east trail, because this is the lower trail. So the lower trail would be B, and the east trail would be C. All right, so we've got the east trail that's gone, the lower trail. The only thing we need to figure out now is what F and G are. So let's look at F and G, and let's erase my marks here. So the west trail is 2 and 9/10. The north trail is 2 and 3/5. Let's just compare those. So I've got the west trail. Let's write that as a mixed number. So 2 and 9/10. And the north trail, 2 and 3/5. I've got to make my denominator the same here. So let's make that 5 into 10 times 2 on the bottom times 2 on the top. Okay, it looks like the west trail is longer. So G would be the west trail. And F would be the north trail. How did you do? Did you get close to getting all of those trails correct? I hope so. Thanks for sticking with me today. Before we head out today, I want to go over a couple examples on your practice page. You're welcome to do this with me. This practice page is in your Schoology folder. However, you can just watch me as I give you some pointers. The reason why I'm doing this practice page is because it's very similar to your homework page tonight, and I want to make sure you know how to do each one of the examples on your homework tonight. So the first section here is asking you to compare using greater than, less than, or equal to. So on some of these, you're going to have numerators that are the same, but denominators that are different. When I have numerators that are the same, I can use my trick, and I can know that when my denominators are different, I always want to choose the smaller denominator as the bigger fraction, because I'd rather share with 8 people than with 10 people. If I have to share with 10 people, then my slices are going to be a lot smaller. So on those, you can use a little bit of a trick. Another type of fraction is going to be, the fraction is the same, 3/4 and 3/4, but my whole number is different, 3 and 4. So which one is greater? Well, I would rather have 4 and 3/4 than 3 and 3/4. Finally, the last type of fraction you're going to run into are fractions that have completely different denominators and numerators. So you can see that in 1, you can see that here in 6, and you can see that here in 5. So when you come to those fractions that have completely different denominators, you need to find a common denominator. So if I'm looking here at number 5, and I see 5 and 5/8 and 5 and 3/5, I might think, okay, well, 5 times 8 is 40. So I'm going to make 40 my common denominator. 5 and 5/8 got into 40. Well, I know I need to multiply by 5, so times 5 times 5. 5 times 5 is 25. So this first one is 25/40. Now I'm going to do my second one. Getting to 40, I need to multiply by 8, the top and the bottom. 3 times 8 is 24. That's close, but it looks like 5 5/8 is greater than 5 3/5 because 25/40 is bigger than 24/40. So I'm going to make a greater than symbol there. Don't forget our trick. When we're finding common denominators, we can just multiply the two denominators, and that's going to get us a common denominator that we can quickly and easily compare. Okay? Looking at this next section here, they're asking you to make equivalent fractions, and they've given you one of the numerators or one of the denominators. So you need to ask yourself, well, 9 times 2 is 18. If I do it to the top or the bottom, I do it to the top. They're also going to ask you to reduce some things. So 24 to 6. So 6 times what is 24? You can figure that one out. And then the last part here, the last section, is your word problems. So you're comparing fractions here. Noah ran 4.5 miles. Kara ran 4 50/100ths of a mile. And Terry ran 4 500ths of a mile. Who ran the shortest distance? So you would be comparing decimals in this one. So first, when we're comparing decimals, we always start with the whole number. Looks like all of our whole numbers are the same. So 4, 4, and 4. Now let's look at the tenths. We've got 5, 5, and 0. Hey, 0 is smaller. That's the shortest distance. So Terry ran the shortest distance. Okay? That's kind of what your homework is going to be looking like tonight. Enjoy!